Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. And today we have a very special guest. He's a MPP out in Barrie, and as well, he is the Attorney General here in Ontario. So thank you so much. We have the Honourable Downey joining us today.
Thrilled to be here, and glad to have a chance to talk to some of your students, and maybe we can, I don't know if you want me to just jump into some things, or if you want to start with questions. How do you want to go ahead?
Let's maybe start. I think my students here listening will be really, if they don't know already, that you've got your journey there, pretty humble beginnings as a court clerk, and I think we always talk about getting into the profession, and who knows where that's going to lead you. So maybe you can talk and tell us a little bit about your journey from those days as a court clerk and leading up to starting your own practice.
I can tell you, I started off, quite frankly, as a student, and all students need summer jobs. So I had been working on farms and roofing and good manual labor, things that make you realize you want to stay in school. And it was an opportunity. I got a chance to work in the Barrie Courthouse as a clerk. It was a summer job. That's the way it started. And literally, I was the person who was taking files over the counter from lawyers and process servers, and processing the paperwork in the family court originally. And I absolutely loved it. It was a chance to meet some of the local lawyers. It was and I had no lawyers in the family. I didn't come from a legal background. My dad drove trains for a living. My mom was a nurse. Pretty regular stuff. And so here I am in the courthouse, and I got a chance to see the system from the inside a little bit. And I was in an undergrad at that point, and then went back and got offered a job in the same courthouse the next year with some different kinds of responsibilities, and got a chance to spend some time interacting with the judges even more, and work on adoptions and some really positive pieces as well. And after that, I went and I did a degree called judicial administration, so like public administration, but of courts. And coming out of that, I was hunting around for a job. Ironically, could not get a job at the Attorney General's office. And now I solved that problem. Life is full circle. I got a job as a court registrar. And because I had spent some time studying how the system worked, I got a chance to be the person that trained new judges on how to do what they're supposed to do with paperwork. And I did that for most of a year, and realized that, you know what, I couldn't make the change that I wanted to make in the system without the law degree, because all the stakeholders had law degrees, I thought. And fast forward a little bit, I decided to apply to law school just to get their credentials. I wanted to go back into the public service and work in the system and improve the system. But by the time I got through law school, I wanted to article. And so I did. I wanted to be a practicing lawyer, not just somebody with a law degree. And once I started practicing law, I fell in love with law. I fell in love with the practice of it. Small business, dealing with clients, buying houses, building businesses, solving problems. And I absolutely loved it. So I got called to the bar in 1999. By 2001, with 4 other law partners, we set up a law firm. And so I was a little bit young and a bit ambitious, I guess. But all I had was student debts, and what can you lose? So we did it. And 20 years later, it was actually established 20 years this coming September. And what a journey it's been. But I do love the practice of law and all the parts that go with that. And so, your students, so they're starting on that journey, and they're going to love it.
I mean, I think that's really fascinating. Right away, you open up, your own practice, and I think, obviously you had, pretty prominent partners there joining you. So how did that kind of come about after getting your articles done, saying, look, this is the way I want to do it, and to getting all those people on board and going from there now 20 years this September?
Yeah, it's, it actually started with 2 other associates that were at the firm, and they'd been at the firm for a while. I had been involved in politics as a volunteer for years before that. So when I came to the firm that I articled at, one of the counsel at the firm, a former partner who had left to go to politics and came back as counsel, we didn't really know each other, but we had a lot of mutual friends. And I knew the parties from sort of the entry level and up, and he knew it from the other end. His name was Doug Lewis, and he had been the Attorney General federally, Solicitor General, Minister of Transport, Deputy House Leader, a whole bunch of things. And he had, as he would say, he was actively retired from politics in 1993, like so many MPs in that year. And so we ended up in the same space and we just really clicked. So when I was talking to the other two associates about leaving, because there were things that I wanted to do that I couldn't get to from where I was. And it was the right choice for the three of us. I said, let me go talk to Doug. I want to give him a heads up that we're leaving. And I did. And he said, hold that thought for 24 hours. And his wife, who was a legal aid lawyer, he came back the next day and said, we want to go with you. And so the five of us set up a law firm. It's life. You can't plan these things. You can't project that it's ever going to happen. It's just all the pieces fell together.
And so, I mean, I know you love the practice of law, and been very involved in things, with the Ontario Bar Association, even I think the Ryerson LPP, and a number of things there. So, what was it like practicing law? I mean, I think that's the question that we ask all of the lawyers and paralegals. Come, just tell us kind of about your practice and that journey there before getting into politics.
Yeah, so I consciously chose to practice in an area where I would have client contact. There's different kinds of law and different ways to work in the system. And I wanted to have real clients with real issues that I could meet with and solve and deal with. And not everybody wants that. Some people want different experiences. So when I went looking for articling positions, quite frankly, I didn't look in Toronto at all. I did my law degree at Dalhousie in Halifax. I didn't look in Halifax or in Toronto. I looked at places that had access to Toronto, but not in it. And I landed in Orillia. There's a whole story that goes with that. I grew up about halfway between Orillia and Toronto. And, it gave me a chance to, again, it's a small business. It's really, you think law is this other thing, but you have payroll, you have accounts receivable, you have clients, you have services you have to deliver. I think, it very much is an entrepreneurial exercise. And people do it differently. One law firm is different than another law firm. One paralegal is going to be different than another paralegal. Some people want to be more operating remotely, and other people want more traditional. So it's just a chance to cut your own path and build your own business the way that you want to do it.
And then that obviously segues right into politics, right? And making that transition there. I know certainly you started in as a city councillor there, and then very recently getting elected as an MPP. So what kind of made you look about politics? I mean, both back then and then again, coming full circle recently there into the provincial platform.
Yeah, so maybe I'll back up in the politics stuff and how I got to city council. Again, my family wasn't political. No active politicians at any level. Even in the extended family, but we always talk politics. We always, around at the Christmas table, with all the extended family, there's always politics breaks out. So I'd grown up with an interest in it. I did an undergrad in poli-sci. And actually I was a page in Queen's Park when I was in grade 8, but that's not a political position, but it gave me a sense of space and that these are real people doing interesting, real things. And that was Bill Davis was premier at the time. And in fact, in the sitting in the legislature, when I was there, there were Bill Davis was there, who was of course premier. Frank Miller, who became premier for a period, was there. Mike Harris and Ernie Eves were backbenchers at the time, both became premiers. Bob Ray and David Peterson were both there. So there were 7 premiers in that space, or 6 premiers in that space while I was there. A really dynamic opportunity as a 13-year-old to see this. I think that stuck in my brain, not a party thing, but just the process. And it demystified it for me a little bit that these are, again, just real people doing their best for their communities. And I really liked that. I wasn't actively involved in politics. Fast forward, that was 1984. And fast forward to 1993, when Jean Charest and Kim Campbell were running to replace Brian Mulroney. And that's when I really got involved. And I met some amazing people, fantastic people who have become lifelong friends. And I've volunteered for politics ever since. When I was on the East Coast for 3 years, I did all the advanced work. If Joe Clark came out, spent a week with him. just all sorts of neat opportunities that would have happened otherwise. And I was just drawn to it. So when I landed in Orillia, I was approached by somebody who was a city councillor to help somebody run for mayor in a neighboring area, because he knew that I was involved in politics. Well, that guy who approached me was actually Bruce Stanton, who's now just retiring as the deputy speaker in Ottawa, longest serving deputy speaker. Great guy, you may not have heard of him. He's one of those hardworking guys that keeps a relatively low profile. He asked me to run the mayor's campaign in 2000. And I thought about it. And I went, if I'm going to run somebody's campaign, I'm just going to go knock on doors myself. And I ran. I was 30 years old, went knocking on doors, told people why I wanted to run, what I wanted to do for the state, and I got elected. And at first, I have to tell you, I felt like the dog that caught the car and didn't know what to do with it when he first got there. But then again, municipal is very granular. You run into people every day that have issues, and you can solve them or you can not solve them. For me, I love the solving part, and I ran a second time, got reelected, had a chance to sit on some provincial boards, the Ontario Smaller Municipalities Board, which is like a sub of the Association of Municipalities. Got to meet some different dynamic people from around the province. And then in 2006, I didn't run again. I wanted to go build the practice some more, have a second child, do some other real life things. And again, you can't plan life. I got approached by Rogers TV to do a TV show. So for an hour a week, for 8 years, I interviewed people, politicians and community people once a week. And it was a great chance to keep high profile. And then the opportunity came along provincially. And I don't know how many people are political or would have followed this, but there was a period of time where a fellow named Garfield Dunlop stepped down to allow Patrick Brown, who had become the leader of the provincial PC party, to run. And that's in the riding I was living in. And I ran that by-election. I was the campaign manager for the by-election, knowing they were redistributing boundaries. And Patrick was going to run in a new riding in Barrie called Barrie, Springwater, Ormondonte, where he had been an MP and a municipal councillor. Well, fast forward a little bit, he was going to run in that riding. And I was in a nomination battle for the Simcoe North riding, 3,000 voters, and I lost by 59 votes. So that was 2017. So I was going back to practice law. It's all fair. And in 2018, after all the other things changed and Premier Ford became the leader, I got a phone call in April of 2018 saying, we want you to run in what would have been Patrick Brown's riding right next door. So I said, oh, this is a Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock, had my feet up on my desk. The sun was shining. I had a coffee in my hand. And I said, no, I've readjusted, running the law practice. I'm happy. And they said, no, we really want you to do it. I said, how long do I have to decide? I said, 7 hours. So 8 hours passed. They phoned me, assuming I was going to say no. I said yes. The next day was a Saturday. I went to Staples, printed some business cards and started knocking on doors. I got elected. And I got to tell you, best thing that ever happened. I absolutely love it. I really love it.
I was it's interesting they're getting sort of the start in municipal politics now into the provincial politics. How are they different in terms of your roles now, in terms of connecting with constituents? I know, obviously, we'll talk about it a bit later. Most of your time there has been hampered a little bit with the COVID, and that changes the dynamics, I'm sure. But perhaps maybe from when you first started versus your time in municipal, what's kind of the difference?
Yeah, you're much closer to the people. Right, municipal, you have your meetings in town. So as the city of Orillia, so in the city, you have your meetings there. You sit on local boards. All of your functions are local. You run into people everywhere, whether you're shopping or going to the library or whatever you're doing. So that the issues are very granular. It's pavement, it's police, it's water pipes, it's library services. We have a county system, so social services come from that, snow plowing, very tangible things that affect people's everyday lives, cracks in sidewalks. There's all sorts of pieces. You have to balance these priorities, and you hear from people in real time. Provincially, it's a little bit different because, municipally, I represented a quarter of the city, which would be about, I'm going to say at that time, about 5,000 homes, say, 8,000 people, about that. It's a few more. Well, provincially, I represent about 110,000 people spread out over a big geography. And so the ability to really connect with people in their space is a lot different and a little bit harder. And people are a little more intimidated. City council, they see you. So they get, people are nervous sometimes about phoning their MP or their MPP. There's a little bit more of a distance there. So we have to work harder provincially to be in the space for people, to open the doors so that we're soliciting what they want to tell us and what's on their minds. So it is very different. I've, again, been involved a long time with different levels. Federal is removed even more than that provincial. And I hear that from my colleagues, people who have served at both levels. So I really like the provincial. It's things that I believe I know. Half of our budget is spent on education, or healthcare rather. Quarter of the budget's education. And then community social services takes up the next chunk, and everything else, including justice, is in that last sliver. So those are big portfolios that affect people, and people see it affect them, hospitals, education, all that kind of stuff.
So I do see a question here, and I think, again, you get another phone call a couple of years into your term here, and the call is, Doug, we want to make you the Attorney General of Ontario. How was that like? And maybe describe that process, and how does it feel to be named the Attorney General at that time?
Yeah, I'm privileged, very privileged, because when I got elected in 2018, there were some meetings, and of course they're all quiet. Nobody knows who's meeting when and what and all that, as they're formulating cabinet and they're formulating different roles. And I knew in 2018 that they would want to have a relatively small cabinet, that they already kind of knew who some of the people would be. And so my feedback to them in a one-on-one, it was me and the Premier and one other person. And I said, look, I don't care where you start me. I'll earn my worth, but give me something to fix. Give me something to manage. I want to fix stuff. And so I gave some examples of that and talked about the finances of the province and how we were on the wrong track and all that sort of thing. Coming out of that meeting, I was appointed as the Parliamentary Assistant to Finance. So that's like the junior minister to Vic Fideli at the time. So that's a privileged spot to be. And the PA to Finance is often seen as the next person to be in cabinet as a shift. So it gave me a real overview of how government worked. Because everything flows through finance. So that was a real opportunity. And yeah, a year later, and you never know when a shuffle's coming. Like, you just don't know. There's always speculation. And every time I think I know what's going on, I don't. So I just do my work over here. But no, I got a call to say, if you were offered something, would you be in a position to accept it? And absolutely. So, okay, well, this was on a Monday evening, and said, okay, well, come down for a meeting Wednesday afternoon at X time, and we'll have a chat. And you might want to tell some family to be available for Thursday morning. That's all I knew. So from Monday night until Wednesday afternoon, I had no idea. I could have been the Minister of Energy. I could have been reshuffled to something else as a PA, who knows? So I showed up. My appointment got moved. I was going to leave at 11 in the morning to be there for 2, but it got moved to 4:30. But I left at 11 anyways, because I was pretty excited. And there was a big snowstorm, and the 400 got piled up and was closed at 1 o'clock. I was already down there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it. So I got to my meeting and came into the room and said, we'd like you to be the Attorney General. And I got to tell you, it was phenomenal, just phenomenal. It's real. As somebody who's worked in the system and wanted to make change in the system, I've tried to push change through. What an honor. And, there's some real icons that have been Attorney Generals. And so, yeah, I don't want to say I was speechless, but definitely touched on different levels. Yeah, real honor.
Now, maybe you can describe kind of the state there of the justice system pre-pandemic, that you take over at that time, and what were some of the
Mm.
challenges that you're facing, taking over that portfolio at that time?
Well, I mean, my staff said that I shouldn't repeat this, but we're not, necessarily, we're not broadcasting too widely. And I said it on TV to Cynthia Mulligan. I said it's like working in Pioneer Village. This is so much paper. The Auditor General said, over 85% of stuff is on paper. Nothing had changed in the 25 years since I was a court clerk. Nothing. Same processes, same paper, same nonsense. You walk into a courthouse and there's paper everywhere. The system had not evolved, and I don't know why. I think, well, I have an idea why. There was no political will to do it, and the things that people wanted to do, I don't know that they necessarily understood the back end of it. Like, having worked in the courthouse, I knew what was happening when we made a decision over here. You can't make one isolated decision. It's a whole system that has to adjust. So it's very antiquated. A lot of strong justice partners with interests. Not a lot of innovation had been encouraged over the years. And I came in with a dossier full of things that I wanted changed, just from my own law practice experience, things in estates and real estate and different solicitor practices. So as your students probably know, barristers are the litigators, the courtroom people, the solicitors are the paperwork and the corporate and real estate and estates people. We believe I'm the first practicing solicitor to be Attorney General in over 60 years. So there was never a focus on that part, or not enough of one. And I'm also I like technology. I like not always the first adapter, but I like using it for, I'd used it in Big Brothers Big Sisters to build systems, and Kiwanis and different charity things that I was involved in. So I was pretty bent on doing it. And we started making change before COVID. Like Bill 161, Smarter, Stronger Justice Act. We started with remote commissioning and other pieces to get it moving. And then COVID hit, and it supercharged our efforts and gave us an ability to bring strong justice partners. When I say strong justice partners, I'm not, Crown attorneys had developed systems, the judges, and we have 3 chief justices, right? Different levels for different things: Court of Appeal, Superior Court, and Ontario Court of Justice. We had regional differences. We still do, and often and will. There were a lot of different interests, but I had insight into these things when I was with the Bar Association. I was treasurer there, secretary there for 5 years. And so I dealt with lawyers and judges and people during that period, gave me some insight into the nuances. So yeah, that's how we got started. And and then COVID.
So then COVID hits, and we, as you mentioned, we have a notoriously slow system. There are 25 years of very little to no change, and all of a sudden they have to adapt. So what would you describe in terms of now that response to COVID, where you don't have a choice, right? I mean, we have to move forward. We have to return back to being able to process through all of these cases that are going on. So can you maybe describe sort of the response there to COVID and how we accelerate? Accelerating justice. How did that all come about?
Yeah, I had visions of some things that I wanted to do, and I didn't think we would get there this fast, but I had models in my head of how we wanted to go. And when COVID hit, I have to tell you that when I say the justice partners, the Criminal Lawyers Association, the Ontario Bar Association, the Federation of Ontario Lawyers, the Black Lawyers Association of Canada, everybody tucked in to help in ways that I just don't think they would have come together before. And the chief justices, there was no light between the 4 of us, between the 3 of them and me, and where we knew we needed to go. And we could not close the justice system. We did not stop it. We knew we couldn't. You just can't. So a lot of dialogue, and created a camaraderie amongst us that we actually changed how you make change. we've created a muscle memory on how to change. And I'll give you a really simple example. Traditionally, the Attorney General meets on a regular basis with the Ontario Court of Justice Chief Justice. And they have an agenda, and they sit and they work through issues, and staff pre-work issues, and then staff work on them afterwards. Well, I was driving this weekend, and I had a half-hour conversation with Chief Justice Mazenov because she had some time on Sunday, and I had some time, and we solved the problem, right? And that's how the system is working now. It's we still report back to the people who will implement and stuff. We do check-ins, make sure we're on the same page, and we can keep moving. So the iterative process is a lot faster. And quite frankly, the paralegals and the lawyers were eager for change. So, and the customers, the clients were eager for change. It was those of us in the system that were not giving them the change they wanted. So when we went out there and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this, somebody would say, hey, how about that? And to this day, I won't always respond on Twitter, but I'll pick up ideas off Twitter. And people say, hey, did you know? Here's the thing that's happening in Denmark, or here's the thing that's happening wherever. And it's given us a chance to solve problems in real time. COVID did that. It made it possible. And I use the analogy, there's resistance to change, obviously. But it had to evaporate. We had no choice. So, you put a laptop in front of somebody who's not really computer literate or comfortable in that space. And I'll pick on a judge, a judge who's not comfortable there. They became comfortable pretty quick. And I think about my grandmother, who, when she came to live with us, she wouldn't use the microwave, right? It was a new thing. She wasn't doing it. Once she learned how to use the microwave, she stopped using the stove, right? She actually found that it served her needs better. And that's what I found with a lot of the users, like with a lot of the judiciary and others, those that were reluctant and said, hey, this is pretty good. Lawyers say, I can schedule a meeting at 9:30. Everybody's there, all the clients, and it starts on time, it finishes on time, nobody had to travel anywhere. That's pretty good stuff. It's actually good for the client, but it's also good for those of us on the other end. So it's given us experiential that we can point and say, that's why we want to do it that way. And it actually works. And they go, yeah, I get it now. I can see it.
Now, I know certainly for my paralegal students, the changes to allow them to become notaries in the same way that lawyers can is something much appreciated. But perhaps looking at some of all the whirlwind there of the last 16 months, some of the modernization efforts that you're most proud of. I know there's so many there, but anything that you can pick and kind of explain here for the students listening.
Yeah, I'm really proud of the way that we've advanced wills and how wills are executed. I'm really proud of how we've automated processes. You can file online now. So many more forms. I mean, again, your students, paralegals are frontline. So when you're dealing with small claims, you can now file online. POA, you can file stuff. We're improving systems. And we're not just automating the systems, we're actually transforming the system. So the first step is to say, why do we even have that form? What are we doing with it? Where does it need to get to, and how does it get there? So I think that part, the piece that your students may not be aware of, but if they take a few moments and look into it, they're going to be on the front end of our tribunal system. I'm really proud of our tribunal system that's in the midst of change. We literally just a couple of days ago put out a navigation tool for Tribunals Ontario that'll deal with landlord-tenant. It'll deal with some other tribunals. It's been in place for about 5 years in BC, this system, and with great results to really help people solve problems in real time and shorten the time that they need to. So the navigation tool is the first part. The second part is going to be a dispute resolution tool. We're not quite there yet, but it'll come this year. So if your students want to be on the front end of landlord-tenant and where we're headed, and maybe someday down the way, we'll get to small claims with that system. But I can tell you that system came to Ontario because I was out in BC at an Attorney General's meeting from across the country, And Attorney General Levy, the NDP AG, him and I get along well. And I said, I really like the system. What would it take for me to be able to adapt it? And we struck a deal. I paid him $1 for the licensing. We've had to spend $28.5 million building it out for Ontario. But the deal is you have it for $1, but any improvements we do, they get to use. So, a great Canadian success story on a cutting edge tribunal system. That's probably my biggest one. I'm very proud of that.
We were talking before we started here, the vaccines, the numbers are going up. We're getting more vaccinations, fully vaccinations. So I guess I was wondering, before, and you talked about this before, let's say I had a matter in Barrie, I'd have to drive up to Barrie, I'd speak for like 4 minutes at the most, maybe wait as well before that, and then drive back to Toronto. Are we looking at continuing all of these changes, or are we going to revert back to what we were doing before? I mean, can I safely put my fax machine on Kijiji now? I mean, can we start getting communications by email being the norm now? I mean, I thought that was always strange. What's going to happen now that we're kind of progressing into times where we may be going back in person a little bit more than we were 6, 12, 18 months ago?
Yeah, you know what? You can put the fax machine on Kijiji, but probably nobody wants to buy it. I'm not kidding you. I literally got a letter from a printer who said that we were making change too fast and that it was affecting his business. He was a guy that prints forms for government and stuff like that. So I thought that's a win. Like, that's great. The rules of procedure actually said in it up until January of this year that you could serve certain things by telegraph. But it didn't mention email. And you know what? It's not rocket science. It's just nobody had turned their mind to it. And the Civil Rules Committee, we empowered them to say, go find this stuff. Like, we're looking for things. I want to do volume. I want to catch us up while we can. And they did. And all these committees that people volunteer on, and I'll have to tell you, if your students are interested in sort of getting a perspective on a broader profession, like, get involved in some part of it. Join associations, join subcommittees, find ways to give input, and don't discount your experience. Everybody's life experience is a little bit different, and we need practical pieces in how it affects people as we make those changes. So it's to answer your question, we're not going back. We can't. The only way we would go back is if the system was working better before, and nobody would tell me it was. The system was not working better before. It was cumbersome. It was expensive. It wasn't accessible. We have to move towards accessibility and cost effectiveness. And I love when I see somebody on social media post, I was in Barrie this morning, Hamilton this afternoon, I'm representing my client in Ottawa tomorrow. And they're doing it from home. And the client is being better served. It's just a better way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, imagine having a client in Thunder Bay that would make it 20. You'd have to fly and stuff like that. That you can now service without leaving your home. I mean, I think that's just a no-brainer, and that we've been able to put these things in there. But I mean, are there any other challenges that you've seen with the modernization? I mean, certainly some people with trials kind of having issues of credibility and things like that, or privacy as well coming up there. But what are some of the next steps that you're looking at? I know you talked about the landlord and tenant board and tribunals, but what are some other things that you're looking at in terms of further modernization while being aware of some of those challenges and concerns? Yeah,
so I mean, we are in person, right? We have to, and we need safe spaces for that. We're working on that. But we're harnessing things like Starlink for more remote areas. So that, because as you know, broadband internet isn't everywhere yet, but it's a pretty important tool. It opens up for us in northern and indigenous communities to try and better serve them. And again, if you're in the north, to talk about a criminal trial, for instance, you will have sometimes the accused and the victim on a little 6-seater plane together, flying to Suluka, then transfer to Kenora to have a hearing. Well, that's re-traumatizing. It's not serving the victim well, and there's ways that we can adapt the system so that we're protecting people and putting the services where they are. So that's to come. I'm a big proponent of the Unified Family Court. I want that to finish expanding through Ontario. It's about halfway through Ontario with 26 sites. We have about 26 more to go. Toronto and the far north are the two holdouts, so we're working on that. But I think the single biggest thing that you'll see coming that will affect you and other paralegals is the filing system. We're moving towards a more robust filing system that will include scheduling, that will include transfer of documents. It's a pretty cutting edge system that will change how people do business, and we're working on that in real time right now.
Now, over in the last few weeks, there's certainly, with politics, there's always people having a difference of opinion. And one of the things that have come up, obviously, was and it was great, I think, for me as an instructor, because I used to always cite, Quebec when we were learning about the charter and the notwithstanding clause. So perhaps maybe you can explain to the students, the use of the notwithstanding clause and with respect to the third-party election spending and how the mechanism works and why, I'm sure you don't feel it's so controversial, but kind of in response to where the the political opponents there are citing, well, why are they doing this?
Yeah, so we'll talk about it from the legal side first, and then we can turn to the politics of it. And and you can do that with a lot of things. That there's different. It was and the federal government to say, look, we want to, the Bill of Rights that Diefenbaker brought in isn't enough. That it's not really doing. Doesn't have the weight. It's an equal statute with the rest of the statutes. And so it doesn't have the ability to guide. It's really just a reference point. And so when Pierre Trudeau Sr., wanted to bring the charter forward, it was to put something in the Constitution that was an overlay, it was something above that was not just a reference point, but something that was a guide that the Supreme Court and others could do. I can tell you the discussions that were had at the time were pretty robust. And one of the pieces that made the difference was that Section 33 went in the charter. And so people talk about you overrode the charter. No, we used one part of the charter to affect another part. And so Section 33 only affects Section 2 and 7 to 15 of the charter. It was built that way. It will only protect certain parts or allow us to override certain parts. Similarly to when you have, say, a Section 7 or a Section 3 or a different section of the charter that is potentially breached, it's sometimes saved by Section 1. I don't know, would you guys have gone through that in your course? The charter, that section Oaks test?
The Oaks test, yep.
Yeah. So Section 1 is a bit of a governor on the other sections. It's kind of like hate speech. Nobody has the right to unbridled speech with no boundaries on it. Section 1 puts boundaries on it, right? So similarly, Section 2 and 7 to 15 allows the balance between the courts and the legislature. And Section 33 was the compromise that allowed the charter to come to be as a mechanism that could override those parts. And the charter would not have come together without it. And I know that because my law partner was there. Doug Lewis was there, who went on to become the Attorney General and Solicitor General. I also had Joe Gibbs, who was the Premier of PEI. He was my law dean when I was in law school. Talked to him about it as well. He was the chair of the Charlottetown Accord years later. So everybody just knew Section 33 was there. Now, when should you use it? That's the political question. Not whether it was a valid tool, but when should you use it? Well, Quebec uses it a lot. Saskatchewan used it. It's been used a couple of times. Newfoundland used it. Ontario had never used it. So there's a body of thought that says it's sacrosanct. It's like a rose in a glass. You can't use it. You can't get at it. In one of my speeches, I said it's like the plastic on your grandmother's couch that you can never sit on. But I disagree with that. I think that in fact it's a tool that was put there for a reason, and the reason was to balance. And the legislature. The primacy of the legislature, I think, is pretty important. I don't think that we should defer everything to the courts. And the people who put the charter together thought that at the time. So yeah, vigorous debates. Politically, well, everybody's going to have their opinion. I think elections are about as important as anything. And making sure that people have a right to be informed without all the megaphone of special interests shouting over them. And Ontario is very unique. The election Ontario's officials and others have commented on the disproportionate amount of third-party spending in Ontario compared to even the federal government. We count it in millions, others count it in the thousands. So I felt, and obviously my colleagues felt, if ever there was a time, election is the time to do it, to protect our system. And look, in the Election Act that I changed, that I brought forward, we empowered independents. We made it simpler for smaller third parties to run and do their financing. Like we did a lot of pieces to help the democratic dialogue. But that's kind of down to the weeds, and that's not what the newspapers pick up every time.
And sort of building on that, I think as well, continuing with this was last week, we're on Justice and Pieces, but there's 41 new justices of the peace, and people look at it and they're like, look, there's law enforcement here, there's this theme. And obviously it's the first rollout after the recent changes there with the appointment process. So maybe you can kind of share your thoughts on just, first of all, the change in the appointment process, maybe what, again, like you said, the media doesn't necessarily pick up those nitty gritty details, and kind of explain here to students what's happened and now what your thoughts are in terms of bringing 41 new justices of the peace on board and what this means for access to justice in Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, we have to have people in positions to do the job. The way that the system's set up is it's not up to me whether we have 41 or 70 or 2. The Associate Chief Justice. So in Ontario, the Ontario Court of Justice, Chief Justice Mazanov is the chief. There are 2 Associate Chief Justices, and one of the associates is Associate Chief Justice Sharon Nicholas. She's in charge of the JPs. So I get a letter from the Chief Justice and Associate Chief Justice Nicholas saying we need X number of JPs in these different spots. They do the analysis, they send it to me. I don't have any, I can't move people around. I can't say, you said 1 in Kingston, but I think you should have 2. That doesn't happen. So I get a list, say, here's what we need. That triggers a process where a chair of what's called JPAC, the Justice of the Peace Advisory Council, they have committees in each region in Ontario, and they put out a call for applications. People apply for the first time ever online. Sorry, that was a little loud there. Where they apply online and they're sorted independently. I have no line of sight to any of this. They collect them, they decide who they're going to interview, they interview, and all that I see at the end is the people that they recommend for appointment in different areas. And then I decide from there, of the 3 people in spot X, which one I think is the most appropriate. So it's it really is a very independent process. The change that we made was to make it 1, electronic, 2, to make it smaller committees, because they were having people like 13 people interviewing somebody. Well, that's nonsense and a waste of time. So now it's, as few as 3 and sometimes as many as 7 doing an interview. And luckily now we can do it by Zoom, right? So they actually interviewed somebody. One of the appointments was over in Africa on service. But it actually created more diversity. We had, I'm really proud, I'm going to publish the numbers either in an op-ed or somewhere. In terms of First Nations, we found a lot of people who are willing to serve and applied and were qualified. The other piece of the legislation that I changed was mandating diversity statistics, because nobody could tell me when I asked who was applying. It's self-disclosing, of course, right? Who was applying, who was getting interviews, who was getting recommended, and ultimately who was getting picked. Nobody was tracking that. And I believe if you don't measure it, you can't change it. And I kept getting told that we have the most diverse bench in Canada, blah, blah, blah. I just think we can do better. And I don't think that we're reaching some communities that we should be. We appointed a Justice of the Peace from the Smelly community for the first time. And I'm pretty proud of that. The guy's a rock star. I think we can do better on that score, and you're going to see more of it. So the changes were meant to actually change the system, and there was some resistance to that because they think that we're up to monkey business or something. But as long as you have an independent committee and you have measurement of things, I think it'll serve us well for years to come.
That's great that you brought up diversity, because we've been talking about diversity. We've been talking about mental health in the legal profession. Now, in your role as the Attorney General, what can we do? It was one thing, obviously, see greater representation in our justice of the peace and judges. But what else can we do to better address these things in our justice system in terms of ensuring diversity at all different levels of, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's senior partners? What can you do specifically as the Attorney General to better reflect that in terms of our community in our legal profession?
Yeah, you know what? The answer is this: get a mentor or be a mentor, or do both. I have a friend who has what he calls a reverse mentor. He's got somebody who's quite a bit junior, fairly new, but knows things that he doesn't know. And they have this exchange of, it's not always one way, it's an exchange of things, and it allows the system to have a better conversation. Participate in the profession. Don't be a wallflower. If you don't say it, nobody knows. If you're having an experience, put it out there. Be proud of, have the confidence. Maybe the single most important thing is authenticity. Be yourself. Do not construct a persona or a work life or whatever to meet some preconceived. Be yourself. Do what you're good at. Engage in your profession. Find colleagues. Find support structures. Take care of your mental health. That's huge. And by being open and having those conversations, that alone will help change the system.
Now, is anything, you mentioned mental health there at the end, is anything for you? I mean, obviously, switching from law into politics, it's not like you get any less of a break there. But what do you do? What have you done maybe in the pandemic to kind of to find some time there to unwind and take care of yourself there? I mean, you've got to take care of yourself before you can take care of all your constituents and all the people of Ontario and third justice system.
Wow, that's a good question. What have I done to take care of myself during the pandemic? I don't know. I've never worked this hard in my life, but I absolutely love it. I wake up in the morning, I'm energized. What are we going to do today? I have an awesome team. I think working remotely has been good for me because it allows me to have a meeting and take a chunk of time to go get a coffee, decompress, do whatever I need to do. If I was in the office, I'd be from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. So I think electronics has helped me, ironically, manage my time a little bit. I think the other thing is that I do things that I believe in. That's good for your mental health. And I'm fortunate. I've had an ability to make change in a space that really is so privileged. But I call my friends, I stay in touch with old buddies, some of whom, quite frankly, never made it through college, and some who are, some are firemen, some are whatever. You keep your friends, right? You have to keep your support structure. I have great family and friends. I have two great kids. So I when I have time, that's where I spend it. I don't. And quite frankly, I'm a pretty laid back guy. I don't get too excited about things I can't control.
Now, last night, the Montreal Canadiens won in overtime their forced game 5. And actually, just while we were talking, I don't know if you got the news there, Italy won on the penalties.
Oh,
there.
No, I didn't get that.
Gone to the Euro finals, or 2020 or 2021, whatever year they want to keep it for their branding there. But, I kept saying, hey, I could win big if I just bet on one event. On Proline, you got to have these three things. It's always that last, the Sunday night game in football that costs you big there. Now, federal legislation's changed. I'm a big Tom Brady fan. I'd love to be able to say that Tom Brady is going to win the Super Bowl again and put a big amount of money on that. What is that going to happen for me? Am I going to be able to do that this February? And maybe you can tell us a bit about iGaming Ontario there that rolled out as well.
I'm excited. iGaming is one of my files. It's because I oversee also the AGCO, the Alcohol Gaming Commission. So iGaming and single event sports betting, which is a component of that, is pretty neat stuff. My goal is to have you able to to place a single event bet by Grey Cup. So I'm going to beat the Super Bowl. We're going to get there for the Grey Cup, which is December 10th, I believe this year. They moved it. I'm not a big bettor, quite frankly. I'm just not. I'm a high risk guy, but I'm not a big bettor. But you know what? It's kind of fun. If you've got a favorite team, or you said Italy won. I mean, my law partner, Tim Timpano, I can't even talk to him tonight then, right? He's gonna be all over me about the soccer game. So, but it'd be fun to say, okay, you feel that great, put $20 on it, and you can't, right? It's coming. It is coming. Today, we announced the sub board for the AGCO that's going to do the implementation. So we're well underway. I want to have the platform open by early fall for people to start to subscribe, like Poker Stars and all those guys. And we should be up and running by the turn of the year. It's phenomenal stuff.
Very exciting there. I think a lot of people who just adds a little bit more intrigue when it's not. I mean, especially for Toronto Maple Leafs fans, you can enjoy the rest of the playoffs with something else to take your mind off a first round loss there. Now, I know you spent some time teaching over the years there as well, and perhaps maybe you can draw on those experiences there. Maybe share some final words of wisdom here. Thank you so much for joining us here. It's been great to hear from you. Great. Again, we were talking about technology. I mean, I don't know how it would have even been possible years ago to try to get to your office there, put on an event, so much more logistics to deal with, getting you down into Toronto and getting people into a room and everything. But it's been great to have people like yourself joining us here today. I really appreciated you taking the time. And so if you have any final words of wisdom for the students listening as they look to become licensed and all of this wonderful change you've been telling us about in terms of modernization, how can they better equip themselves to be the paralegals and lawyers of 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, look, I guess my advice is find your passion, and you probably don't know what it is yet. I ended up becoming a real estate specialist. I started out doing litigation. Until I started doing it, I didn't know. But I put myself in a spot where somebody could give me exposure to different things. So, doors open. You can't plan life. It is not a straight line. Look for opportunities and take them. If somebody's offering you an opportunity to join a committee or to do something, don't overextend, but those doors and windows are opening for you. And as you get called, as a member of the Law Society of Ontario, I'm committed to making sure that paralegals are a robust part of our system, and that's why the notary and some of the other pieces that we're working on, you have a role to play. So take it proudly. Don't ever apologize for what you don't know. If somebody asks you questions, say, I don't know, and go, but I know where to find the answer. Go find the answer and serve them well. I'm excited that we have more people joining the profession.
Perfect. So thanks once again for joining. Wish you all the best there. And thanks again for taking the time and joining us. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. And we'll see you hopefully again tomorrow at 5 p.m. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.